The massive space station floated in the darkness between stars, a crystal structure that caught the light of distant suns and made it dance across its surface. Station Apex was the pride of the Galactic Combat Federation, a place where warriors from 79 different species came to prove their worth. For 3,000 years, champions had fought here, and the winners claimed not just glory, but real power. Trade routes, territorial rights, political influence, all of it could change hands based on who won in the fighting arena. Jake Morrison stood in the arrival bay and looked up at the enormous ceiling that seemed to stretch forever. He was a long way from Earth, farther than he had ever imagined going when he signed up for the military 15 years ago. Back then, humanity had just made contact with the wider galaxy, and everything was new and exciting. Now, humanity was trying to find its place among species that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. A group of alien warriors walked past him, and Jake heard their laughter. He did not need a translator to understand they were laughing at him. One of them, a creature that looked like a giant insect with gleaming black armor covering its body, pointed at Jake with one of its 6 limbs. The insect warrior said something in a clicking language, and the others laughed harder. Amy Carter, Jake's coach and training partner, walked up beside him. She carried their equipment bags and wore the same uniform Jake did. Simple, gray workout clothes with Earth's flag on the shoulder. Amy had been with Jake since the beginning, back when they were both just soldiers learning hand-to-hand combat in a military gym. "They think this is funny," Amy said quietly. "They think we don't belong here." Jake nodded. "Yeah, I noticed. Does it bother you?" Jake thought about it for a moment. "Not really. Let them laugh. Words don't hurt me." They walked through the station's corridors, following the signs that would take them to the fighter preparation areas. Everywhere they looked, there were aliens of every shape and size. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, others on 4 or 6 or 8. Some floated through the air without touching the ground. Some had skin that looked like metal. Others had scales or fur, or something that Jake could not even identify. The registration hall was packed with fighters and their support teams. Jake joined the line and waited his turn. In front of him, a massive creature that looked like it was made of living rock spoke with an official. The rock creature stood at least 10 feet tall and probably weighed more than a small car. Jake wondered how anyone was supposed to fight something like that. When Jake reached the front of the line, the official looked up from his screen and blinked all 3 of his eyes in surprise. The official was a small alien with purple skin and a very thin body. He looked at Jake, then at Amy, then back at his screen, like he was confused. "You are the human competitor?" the official asked in perfect English, though his voice sounded like wind chimes. "Yes, sir," Jake replied. "Jake Morrison, representing Earth." The official made a sound that might have been a sigh. "I see. Well, everything appears to be in order with your registration. However, I feel obligated to inform you that no species has ever won a match in their first tournament appearance. Perhaps you would prefer to observe this year and compete in a few decades when you are more prepared?" Amy started to say something, but Jake put a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for the concern, sir. But we'll compete this year." The official processed Jake's credentials and handed him an identity badge that would give him access to the training areas and the arena itself. As Jake and Amy walked away, they heard the official talking to his colleague in a language they did not understand, but the tone was clear enough. The official thought this was a waste of time. The preparation chambers were beyond anything Jake had seen before. The training rooms could simulate any environment, any gravity level, any atmospheric condition. Fighters from across the galaxy were working out, and Jake watched them with careful attention. He was not just looking at their muscles or their speed. He was watching how they moved, how they balanced, where they put their weight when they struck or blocked. A tall, elegant alien with silver skin and 4 arms noticed Jake watching. The alien walked over with smooth, confident steps. Everything about the way this alien moved suggested grace and deadly skill. "You are the human," the alien said. Her voice was like music. "I am Kiravel of the Vashin. I have studied your species file. You have no natural armor, no enhanced speed, no energy manipulation abilities, no venomous defenses. Tell me, why did your people send you here to be embarrassed? Jake met her eyes calmly. We sent me here to compete. Kiravel made a sound that might have been a laugh. How charming. You have courage. I will grant you that. But courage without ability is just foolishness. Perhaps after you lose your first match, you will understand why the younger species usually observe for several centuries before attempting to compete. She walked away before Jake could respond. Amy was angry. Jake could see it in the way she gripped the equipment bag. But he just shrugged. Save it for the fights, he told her. Over the next few days, Jake trained and observed. He watched every match he could access on the station's video system. He studied fighters from dozens of species, learning their styles, their preferences, their habits. Amy worked with him on conditioning, making sure his reflexes were sharp and his body was ready. The other fighters continued to ignore or mock them. The giant insect warrior from the Arrival Bay, whose name Jake learned was Zelthar, was the current supreme champion. Zelthar had won the tournament 4 times, and nobody seemed to think he would lose this year either. When reporters asked Zelthar about the human competitor, he laughed and said that perhaps the human would learn something by watching real warriors fight. The opening ceremonies were incredible. The arena could hold 100,000 spectators, and every seat was filled. Fighters were introduced one by one, and each received cheers from their supporters in the crowd. When Jake's name was called, there was a moment of silence. Then scattered laughter rippled through the arena. Jake walked to his position on the presentation platform. He stood alone, under the lights, while holographic displays showed information about him to the crowd. Height, weight, species classification, homeworld. Everything about the display seemed to emphasize how ordinary he was compared to the other fighters. But Jake did not look down. He stood straight and looked out at the crowd. Let them laugh. Let them think he was weak. Words and laughter could not hurt him. Only losing could hurt him. And he had not lost yet. The ceremony ended, and the tournament brackets were announced. Jake's first match would be tomorrow against a fighter named Drexon from the Valcor species. The betting markets the arena floor felt solid under Jake's feet as he walked to the center circle. Above him, 100,000 faces looked down from the stands. Most of them not even human-shaped. The noise was incredible, a mixture of sounds that no human throat could make, cheers and calls in 100 different languages. But Jake could feel the mood in the room. They were not cheering for him. They were here to watch him lose. Across the circle, Drexon waited. The Valcor fighter stood 7 feet tall, with 4 powerful arms and skin that looked like it was covered in natural armor plates. Each of Drexon's hands had 3 fingers that ended in thick, blunt claws. His face was almost human-like, but his eyes were solid black and showed no emotion at all. Amy's voice came through the small earpiece Jake wore. Remember, Valcor physiology puts most of their weight forward. They charge hard, but they commit completely. Use that. Jake nodded slightly. The referee, a floating sphere of light that spoke in a computerized voice, announced the rules. Standard combat regulations. Fight until submission, incapacitation, or voluntary withdrawal. No weapons, no enhancement drugs, no killing strikes. The referee asked both fighters if they understood. Both agreed. The starting tone sounded like a bell made of glass breaking. Drexon charged immediately, exactly as Amy had predicted. The Valcor came forward with all 4 arms extended, planning to grab Jake and crush him with overwhelming strength. It was a straightforward tactic, one that had probably worked 1,000 times before against opponents who panicked or tried to match strength with strength. Jake did not panic. He had 3 seconds while Drexon closed the distance, and he used every millisecond. He watched the way Drexon's feet hit the floor, the angle of his shoulders, the spacing between his 4 arms. Jake's brain processed the information automatically, the result of 15 years of training and thousands of hours studying human martial arts from dozens of different cultures. When Drexon reached him, Jake moved. He did not move backward or to the side. He moved forward and down, dropping under Drexon's reaching arms and using the Valkor's own momentum against him. Jake's shoulder hit Drexon in the center of mass, and Jake pushed upward with his legs while pulling with his arms. Physics did the rest. Drexon's enormous weight, combined with his forward momentum, turned into rotation. The Valkor warrior flipped over Jake's shoulder and crashed onto his back on the arena floor. The crowd gasped. It was the first time they had made a sound that was not laughter. Drexon started to rise, surprised but not hurt. The armor plates on his skin had protected him from the impact, but Jake was already moving to the next step. While Drexon was off balance, Jake struck at specific points on the Valkor's body. Nerve clusters that Amy had helped him locate by studying Valkor anatomy files for weeks. Jake's strikes were not powerful enough to break through Drexon's armor, but they did not need to be. He was hitting places where nerves were close to the surface. Places where even light pressure caused the nervous system to react. Drexon's lower left arm went numb. Then his right leg stopped responding correctly. The Valkor tried to stand, tried to fight, but his body was not listening to his commands. Jake struck twice more. Precise hits to pressure points that human martial artists had been using for thousands of years, adapted for Valkor physiology. Drexon fell to one knee, then to both knees. His eyes showed confusion and frustration. He tried to rise one more time, but his legs would not support him. The referee's computerized voice announced the count. If Drexon could not stand within 10 seconds, the match was over. 10 seconds passed. Drexon remained on his knees, unable to coordinate his limbs. The referee declared Jake Morrison the winner. The arena fell completely silent. Then, the noise came back. But it was different now. Confused chatter in dozens of languages. Jake could feel thousands of eyes on him as he helped Drexon to his feet. The Valkor's nervous system would recover in a few minutes, and Jake wanted to show respect. Drexon looked at Jake with those solid black eyes and made a gesture that might have been a nod of acknowledgement. Amy was waiting in the recovery area, her face showing a smile she was trying to hide. 45 seconds. I think that might be a record for a first match. Jake drank water and tried to control his breathing. It was a good plan. He fought exactly like you said he would. He fought like every Valkor fights. Direct, powerful, relying on strength. But you fought smarter. Amy paused. The next one won't be so easy. They'll study that footage. They'll see what you did. She was right. Jake's second match came 2 days later, against a Prythian fighter named Shikar. The Prythians were known for being tactical and intelligent. Shikar had watched Jake's first fight. That much was obvious from the way she approached the match. Shikar did not charge. She stayed at distance, moving in circles around Jake, watching his footwork and testing his reactions with quick strikes that did not commit her to any position. She was studying him the same way he had studied Drexon. Jake let her study. He moved defensively, blocking and evading, giving her information, but not all of it. He kept his best techniques hidden, waiting for the moment when Shikar would commit to a real attack. It took almost a minute, which felt like an hour, under the arena lights. When Shikar finally saw what she thought was an opening, she attacked with a combination of strikes that should have been unstoppable. High feint, low strike, spinning follow-up. It was beautiful technique, the result of centuries of Prythian martial tradition. He recognized the setup, the weight transfer, the breathing pattern that preceded the combination. Jake was not where Shikar expected him to be. He had moved before she committed, reading her intention from the tiny preparatory movements her body made. When Shikar's spinning strike hit empty air, Jake was already behind her, and his counterstrike hit a nerve cluster at the base of her neck. Shikar dropped like someone had cut her strings. The referee counted, but Shikar did not get up. 2 minutes and 17 seconds. Another victory for the human. The murmuring in the crowd was louder now. Jake heard his name being spoken in alien languages. The laughter had stopped completely. Jake's third match, fourth match, and fifth match followed the same pattern. He studied his opponents, found their patterns, and used their own techniques against them. A Zethian warrior who relied on superior speed found that speed meant nothing if Jake was already where he needed to be. A Korvax fighter who used brute strength learned that strength could be redirected and turned into weakness. By the time Jake defeated a Krithian honor guard in his fifth match, the entire tournament had changed. The human was not a joke anymore. The human was dangerous. Ambassador Linda Hayes from Earth's delegation watched from the viewing boxes as alien dignitaries who had ignored her for weeks suddenly wanted to talk. They asked questions about human training methods, about Earth's martial traditions, about where Jake had learned to fight like this. Linda gave them simple answers. Humans had been fighting each other for 10,000 years before they reached space. Every culture on Earth had developed martial arts, fighting systems designed to let smaller or weaker fighters defeat larger and stronger opponents. Jake had studied many of these systems and combined them into something new. The aliens listened, and Linda could see them reassessing everything they thought they knew about humanity. In the preparation chamber, Amy worked on Jake's shoulders, helping his muscles relax after the fifth victory. The betting markets have shifted. You're not the favorite, but you're not the joke anymore either. People are starting to think you might actually go far in this tournament. Jake closed his eyes and focused on breathing. His body was tired, but his mind was clear. How far do you think I can go? Jake B. Amy was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I think you can win the news of Jake's victories spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communications could carry it. On 79 different worlds, people who had never heard of humans before were now watching footage of this strange two-armed fighter from Earth who kept winning matches he should have lost. Sports analysts and combat experts argued on broadcasts about whether Jake's success was luck or skill. Most agreed it had to be luck. Surely the human would fall when he faced real competition. Captain Greg Sullivan sat in the Earth delegation's conference room and watched these broadcasts with interest. Greg had been Jake's commanding officer back when Jake was just another soldier in Earth's military. Greg knew Jake better than most people. And he knew that luck had nothing to do with what was happening in that arena. They still don't understand, Greg said to the other Earth representatives in the room. They keep looking for some trick, some hidden technology we're using. They can't accept that Jake is just better than their fighters. Linda Hayes, the Earth ambassador, nodded thoughtfully. It's because they've never had to adapt. Think about it. Every species here evolved on a single planet with specific conditions. High gravity, low gravity, water worlds, desert worlds. Their combat styles reflect those environments. But Earth had everything. Humans learned to fight in every climate, every terrain, every situation imaginable. Plus, we spent 10,000 years fighting each other, added Dr. Helen Price, the medical specialist on Earth's team. Every culture developed martial arts. Chinese Kung Fu, Japanese Karate, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Russian Sambo, Israeli Krav Maga, and hundreds more. Jake studied all of them and combined the best techniques from each. Greg leaned back in his chair. The question is, can he keep winning? He's reached the quarterfinals now. The fighters from here on out are the best in the galaxy. They've held championship titles for years, or even decades. The answer came sooner than Greg expected. Jake's quarterfinal match was scheduled against Sarath, the Esrathi Grand Champion. Sarath had held her title for 16 consecutive years, longer than any other current champion. The Esrathi were a reptilian species with incredible speed and a natural weapon that made them feared across the galaxy. They produced a neurotoxin in their claws that could paralyze most species with a single scratch. In the preparation chamber, Jake watched footage of Sarath's previous matches with Helen at his side. The doctor had spent 3 days analyzing Esrathi physiology and the properties of their venom. The neurotoxin attacks the nervous system, Helen explained, pointing to molecular diagrams on her tablet. It causes immediate paralysis in most species. But I've been working on something. It's not an antidote exactly, but it might give you some resistance. Might? Jake asked. The problem is we've never tested it on humans before. Esisrathi venom has never touched a human nervous system, so I'm extrapolating from similar compounds. I can't guarantee it will work. Jake thought about it. What's the worst that happens if I take your treatment and it doesn't work? You get paralyzed and lose the match. And what happens if I don't take it and Sarath scratches me? Helen smiled slightly. You get paralyzed and lose the match. Then I'll take the treatment. At least we're trying something. For 3 days, Helen administered a series of injections that were designed to alter Jake's nervous system chemistry slightly. They also trained specifically for fighting against an opponent with superior speed. Amy had Jake work with reaction drills, learning to predict movement rather than respond to it. You can't match her speed, Amy said during training. So, stop trying. Instead, watch for the tells. Every fighter has them. Little movements they make before they commit to an attack. Find Sarath's tells, and you can be where you need to be before she gets there. The day of the match arrived. The arena was packed beyond its normal capacity. Aliens had traveled from across the galaxy to watch this fight. The betting markets showed Sarath as the heavy favorite, but the odds were closer than they had been for any of Jake's previous matches. People were starting to believe the human might actually have a chance. Sarath entered the arena to massive cheers from the crowd. She was smaller than Jake, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with emerald green scales that caught the light and made her look like she was made of precious stones. Her movements were fluid and perfect, like water flowing. When she looked at Jake, her vertical slit eyes showed no emotion at all. The referee gave the rules. Both fighters acknowledged. The starting tone sounded. Sarath moved so fast she seemed to teleport. One moment she was 10 feet away. The next moment her clawed hand was streaking toward Jake's throat. Jake twisted, and the claw scratched across his shoulder instead, tearing through his uniform and drawing blood. The crowd roared, knowing the match was over. One scratch was all it took. Jake would be paralyzed in seconds, but Jake did not fall. He felt the venom enter his bloodstream, felt his nervous system try to shut down. But Helen's treatment was working. Not perfectly, his left arm went partially numb, but he could still move and think. Sarath's eyes widened in surprise. That moment of surprise was all Jake needed. He rolled with the momentum of Sarath's strike, using her own speed to carry her past him. As she passed, Jake's foot swept low and caught her ankles. Sarath's speed turned against her. 20. S-way. She could not adjust in time, and she hit the arena floor hard. Jake did not give her time to recover. He closed the distance, keeping his body tight and defensive. Sarath struck again and again, her claws cutting shallow wounds on Jake's arms and shoulders. Each scratch delivered more venom, and Jake could feel his body struggling to fight it off. His movements got slower, his reactions less sharp, but he only needed one opening. Sarath committed to a finishing strike, certain that Jake was too paralyzed to counter. Jake had been waiting for that certainty. For that moment, when Sarath would stop being cautious. He caught her extended arm, used her momentum to pull her off balance, and struck with his right hand at a point on her neck that Amy had identified from the footage. Sarathi had lighter skeletal structures than humans, an adaptation for their incredible speed. The strike that would have bruised a human broke through Sarath's natural defenses. She gasped and fell to one knee. Jake maintained the hold, not trying to hurt her but controlling her position until the referee could make the call. Sarath tried to rise but could not. Her breathing was labored. The referee counted to 10. Jake Morrison had defeated the 16-year champion. The arena exploded with noise. Half the crowd was cheering, shocked and excited by what they had just seen. The other half was stunned into silence, unable to process that their champion had lost to a human. Jake helped Sarath to her feet. She looked at him with those reptilian eyes, and made a gesture of respect with her clawed hands. Through a translator, she said, "You are stronger than you appear, human. I did not think your species capable of such resistance. We're more adaptable than most people think," Jake replied. Medical teams took both fighters to the recovery area. Jake's wounds were treated, and the remaining venom was flushed from his system. Helen ran tests and confirmed that her treatment had worked, though barely. Without it, Jake would have been paralyzed within seconds of the first scratch. "You got lucky," Helen told him. "If Sarath had landed a direct hit instead of a glancing scratch, I don't think my treatment would have been enough." "But she didn't land a direct hit," Jake said. "That's what matters." The semi-final match was announced. Jake would face Prism 7, the Shendari champion. The Shendari were crystalline beings who could manipulate gravitational fields. Prism 7 had won 3 championships and had never lost a match in 12 years of competition. Amy studied footage of Prism 7 and identified a pattern. The gravitational manipulation requires specific positioning. Prism 7 needs to create geometric shapes with his movement to generate the fields. If you can control the space and deny him those positions, you can neutralize his advantage. Jake spent 2 days learning spatial awareness drills, training himself to recognize when Prism 7 was trying to create the geometric patterns he needed. The match itself was less violent than the fight with Sarath but more technical. Jake constantly moved to break Prism 7's positioning, forcing the crystalline fighter into reactive mode instead of proactive mode. The week before the championship match felt longer than all the previous weeks combined. Jake trained, but not as hard as before. Amy told him that his body needed rest more than it needed additional conditioning. Instead, they focused on mental preparation and strategy. Zelthar was unlike any opponent Jake had faced. The Crithian Supreme Champion stood 8 feet tall with 6 limbs, compound eyes that could see in nearly all directions at once, and an exoskeleton that had never been breached in 4 championship reigns. Zelthar had fought hundreds of matches against dozens of different species, and he had won every single time. The galactic media could talk about nothing else. Every broadcast, every news feed, every social channel was filled with analysis and speculation. Most experts still favored Zelthar, but the margin was closer than it had ever been for any of his championship defenses. Some analysts pointed out that Jake had defeated every opponent through adaptation and intelligence rather than physical superiority. Others argued that Zelthar's experience and physical advantages would be too much to overcome. On Earth, billions of people watched and waited. Jake's success had changed humanity's position in the galaxy almost overnight. Trade negotiations that had stalled for years were suddenly moving forward. Territorial disputes were being settled in humanity's favor. Aliens who had dismissed humans as primitive newcomers were now eager to establish diplomatic and economic relationships. All of it depended on what happened in the championship match. Linda Hayes felt the weight of that responsibility every time she spoke with Earth's government. They asked her the same question in different ways. Could Jake actually win? Linda gave them honest answers. She did not know. What she did know was that Jake had already accomplished more than anyone had thought possible. Win or lose, he had earned humanity's place at the table. Greg Sullivan took a different approach. He spent time with Jake, not talking about the fight but about other things. They discussed Jake's daughter and what she was doing in school. They talked about old training exercises back on Earth and laughed about mistakes they had made as young soldiers. Greg understood that Jake needed to be reminded that there was a life beyond this arena, a world that would still exist regardless of the match outcome. Helen continued to monitor Jake's physical condition. The wounds from Sarath had healed, but the venom had stressed his nervous system. She made sure Jake was eating properly and getting enough sleep. She also prepared contingency plans for different scenarios. If Zelthar's attacks caused specific types of injuries, Helen would be ready. 3 days before the match, Jake received an unexpected visitor. Sarath, the Azrathi champion he had defeated, came to the preparation chamber. Through a translator, she asked if she could speak with Jake privately. They sat in a quiet corner of the facility. Serath's reptilian features were hard to read, but her body language seemed respectful. "I have competed in this tournament for 18 years, Serath said. "I have fought the best warriors from across the galaxy. In all that time, only 3 fighters have ever defeated me, and 2 of them required multiple attempts. You are the only one to defeat me in a single match." "You're a great fighter," Jake replied. "I got lucky." "No." Serath's vertical pupils focused on Jake intently. "It was not luck. I have reviewed the footage many times. You studied my patterns and exploited a weakness I did not know I had. That is not luck. That is skill and intelligence." She paused. "I came to tell you that I believe you can defeat Zelthar. But you must understand something about the Crithians. They do not show weakness. Zelthar will never admit doubt or fear. He will fight with absolute confidence, even if he is losing. You must be prepared for that." Zelthar. Jake nodded. "Thank you for the advice. There is something else." Serath made a gesture with her clawed hands. "If you win, it will change how the galaxy sees humanity. But it will also change how we see ourselves. For 3,000 years, the same species have dominated this tournament. We have become comfortable, perhaps too comfortable. Your victories have reminded us that dominance is not permanent. Some of us are grateful for that reminder. Others are angry. Be careful. Jake Morrison. Not everyone wants you to succeed." After Serath left, Jake thought about her words. He had been so focused on the fights themselves that he had not considered the larger political implications. His success was disrupting a power structure that had existed for millennia. There would be consequences to that. Win or lose. The night before the championship, Jake could not sleep. He lay in his quarters and thought about everything that had led to this moment. He thought about the human history Amy had told him about, the thousands of years of warfare and conflict that had forced humanity to become expert survivors and fighters. He thought about all the martial arts masters across Earth's history who had contributed techniques to his training. He thought about his daughter, waiting on Earth, believing her father could do the impossible. Morning came too quickly. Jake ate breakfast with Amy, though neither of them had much appetite. They went through the pre-match routine mechanically, both of them quiet. There was nothing left to say that had not already been said. The arena filled hours before the match was scheduled to begin. Representatives from all 79 Federation species attended. Neutral observers from non-aligned systems came to watch. The Crithian delegation occupied an entire section, thousands of insectoid beings who had absolute confidence in their champion. Earth's delegation was much smaller, just a few dozen humans, but they wore their flag proudly. Linda Hayes sat in the front row, Greg Sullivan beside her, both of them trying to look calm. When it was time, Jake walked through the tunnel to the arena floor. The noise was incredible, a wall of sound that hit him like a physical force. Above him, the massive screens showed his face and statistics. Human, male, age 33, 5 feet 11 inches, 180 pounds, representative of Earth. On the opposite side of the arena, Zelthar emerged to even louder cheers. The Crithian Supreme Champion was everything Jake was not. Massive, armored, alien, and terrifying. When Zelthar raised his 6 limbs in a victory salute, the crowd went wild. The 2 fighters met in the center circle. Up close, Zelthar was even more imposing. His compound eyes reflected light in strange patterns, making it impossible to tell where he was looking. His mandibles clicked in a way that might have been speech, or might have been a threat display. The referee began the final rule announcement. Standard combat regulations. Fight until submission, incapacitation, or voluntary withdrawal. No weapons, no enhancements, no killing strikes. Both fighters acknowledged understanding. Jake looked up at Zelthar and saw his own reflection in those compound eyes. He looked small and fragile, and completely outmatched. The old Jake, the one who had arrived at this station weeks ago, might have felt fear at this moment. But that Jake was gone. The fighter standing here now had defeated champions from across the galaxy. He had earned the right to be here. The referee asked if both fighters were ready. Zelthar clicked his mandibles in affirmation. Jake said, "Yes." The starting tone sounded. Zelthar attacked with the precision of a master and the confidence of someone who had never lost. His 6 limbs struck from multiple angles 3 minutes into the match. Jake Morrison was bleeding from cuts on his face and arms. His ribs ached where Zelthar had landed solid hits. Every breath hurt. The crowd noise had become a constant roar, drowning out everything else. From their perspective, this match was going exactly as expected. The Supreme Champion was dismantling the human challenger, piece by piece, but Jake was not panicking. Pain was just information. His old instructors had taught him. It told you where you had been hit, but not where you would be hit next. The important thing was to stay calm and keep analyzing. And Jake was analyzing everything. In those 3 minutes of defensive fighting, Jake had collected data. He knew now that Zelthar favored his upper right limb for power strikes. He knew that the lower left limb always moved a fraction of a second before the others when Zelthar prepared a combination attack. He knew that Zelthar's compound eyes, for all their advantages, created a tiny blind spot directly behind and below the Crithian's center mass. Most importantly, Jake had identified something Serath had warned him about. Zelthar fought with absolute confidence, but that confidence was also a weakness. The Crithian champion had fought the same way for so many years that his patterns had become predictable. He had won so many times using these same techniques that he saw no reason to change them. Jake had been waiting for the moment when Zelthar would attempt his signature finishing combination. Every Supreme Champion had one. A sequence of attacks that had ended dozens of matches. From the footage Jake had studied, he knew Zelthar's combination started with a high feint from the upper limbs, followed by a sweeping attack from the lower limbs, and finished with a grabbing hold from the middle limbs that would immobilize the opponent for a final strike. That moment came at 3 minutes and 40 seconds into the match. Jake saw the setup, recognized the pattern, and instead of defending, he moved. Not away from the attack but into it, closing the distance faster than Zelthar expected. The Crithian's high feint hit empty air. The sweeping attack from the lower limbs missed because Jake was too close. And when the middle limbs reached to grab, Jake was in that tiny blind spot. Serath had helped him understand. For the first time in the match, Jake was in a position to attack. He struck at the joints between Zelthar's exoskeleton plates, the places where armor had to be thinner to allow movement. His strikes were precise, targeting nerve clusters and pressure points. Not hard enough to break the armor, but hard enough to send signals through Zelthar's nervous system. Zelthar's lower right limb went numb. Just for a second. But that second was enough. The Crithian's perfect balance was disrupted. He took a step backward to recover, and Jake pressed forward. For the first time, the human was not retreating. The crowd's roar changed tone. Something unexpected was happening. Jake did not give Zelthar space to reset. He stayed close, using the Crithian's size against him. At this distance, Zelthar's 6 limbs were crowded together, getting in each other's way. The Supreme Champion tried to create separation, but Jake moved with him, maintaining the close distance like a shadow. Zelthar adapted quickly, as any champion would. He changed his attack patterns, using shorter strikes that worked better at close range. But now, Jake knew what to look for. He could read the tiny preparatory movements that preceded each attack. The shift of weight, the rotation of joints, the angle of Zelthar's body. Jake blocked and countered, slowly turning the fight from a one-sided beating into a genuine contest. At 5 minutes, both fighters separated to catch their breath. Zelthar's compound eyes studied Jake with what might have been respect or might have been recalculation. The Crithian was no longer certain of easy victory. Amy's voice came through Jake's earpiece, calm and focused. You're doing it. Keep the pressure on. Don't let him dictate the range. The fighters came together again. This time, Zelthar fought more cautiously, aware that the human was more dangerous than he had appeared. But caution was not something Zelthar had much experience with. For years, he had been the one forcing opponents to be cautious. Fighting defensively felt wrong to him, and that discomfort showed in his movements. Jake saw the hesitation and exploited it. He feinted toward Zelthar's right side, drawing a defensive response, then struck at the left. The hit landed on a joint cluster that Amy had identified from the footage. Zelthar's upper left limb dropped slightly, the muscles not responding quite right. The crowd was on their feet now. In the Crithian section, the confident cheers had been replaced by concerned chittering. In Earth's small section, Linda Hayes gripped Greg Sullivan's arm so hard she was probably bruising him. At 7 minutes, Jake landed a solid hit to Zelthar's midsection, targeting the cluster of nerve endings that controlled the Crithian's lower limbs. Zelthar actually stumbled, for the first time in the match. The Supreme Champion's mandibles clicked rapidly in what might have been frustration or pain. Zelthar knew he was in trouble now. Jake could see it in the way the Crithian moved, the way he hesitated before committing to attacks. The absolute confidence was cracking. Zelthar tried to fall back on his signature combination again, the finishing move that had won so many matches, but Jake had seen it once already. He knew exactly how to counter it. When Zelthar attempted the high feint, Jake did not react at all. When the lower limbs swept, Jake jumped over them, and when the middle limbs reached to grab, Jake caught one of them and used it to pull himself up onto Zelthar's back, into that blind spot that compound eyes could not cover. From that position, Jake struck at the base of Zelthar's neck, where the exoskeleton was thinnest to allow head movement. It was not a killing strike. Nothing that would cause permanent damage. But it was a strike to a critical nerve center. Zelthar's entire body seized up for a moment, his nervous system overwhelmed by the signal. The Supreme Champion fell to one knee, then to both knees. Jake released his hold and stepped back, breathing hard, his body screaming in pain from the hits he had taken. But he was standing, and Zelthar was not. The referee began the count. If Zelthar could not stand within 10 seconds, the match was over. Zelthar tried to rise. His 6 limbs pushed against the arena floor, his muscles straining. But the nerve strike had disrupted his coordination. He made it halfway up, then fell again. The crowd held its breath. The entire galaxy held its breath. The count reached 10. The referee's computerized voice announced the result. Jake Morrison, representative of Earth, was the new Galactic Combat Federation champion. The arena exploded into chaos. Half the crowd was cheering wildly, celebrating the most shocking upset in tournament history. The other half sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The Supreme Champion had fallen. The Crithian, who had held the title for 4 consecutive reigns, had been defeated by a human, a species that had joined the Federation only years ago. Jake stood in the center of the arena, exhausted and in pain, barely able to believe it himself. He looked up at the screens, showing the replay, and saw himself strike the winning blow. It had really happened. He had really won. Zelthar slowly got to his feet, his coordination returning. The Crithian champion walked over to Jake, and for a moment, Jake was not sure what would happen. Then Zelthar raised his 6 limbs in a traditional Crithian salute of respect, a gesture that Jake had seen Crithians give to honored elders and war heroes, but never to an opponent. Through a translator, Zelthar spoke loud enough for the entire arena to hear. I have fought hundreds of battles across decades of competition. I have defeated the greatest warriors of 79 species. Today, I learned that there are still lessons to be learned and opponents to be respected. Jake Morrison of Earth, you have earned this victory. You have earned my respect. And you have earned your place among the champions of the galaxy. The words were broadcast across every Federation world. On Earth, Billions of people celebrated. On Station Apex, the human delegation surrounded Jake, everyone trying to congratulate him at once. Medical teams moved in to treat his injuries, but Jake barely noticed. He was looking for someone specific in the crowd. He found Amy Carter pushing through the chaos. When she reached him, she had tears in her eyes. They had done it together. Coach and fighter, human teamwork, defeating galactic supremacy. The medical facility on Station Apex was the most advanced hospital Jake had ever seen. Machines scanned his body with lights he could not name, and doctors from 3 different species worked together to treat his injuries. The ribs where Zelthar had struck him were bruised but not broken. The cuts on his face and arms were cleaned and sealed with something that made the skin knit together almost instantly. Within an hour, Jake felt better than he had any right to feel after fighting the supreme champion of the galaxy. Dr. Helen Price stood beside his bed, reviewing the medical scans. If any of those hits had landed a few inches differently, we would be having a very different conversation right now. But they didn't land differently, Jake replied. That's what matters. Helen smiled. Spoken like a true fighter. Though I hope you're planning to take some time off before the next tournament. Your body needs rest. Even if your mind is ready to keep going. Outside the medical facility, the celebration was still going on. Jake could hear the noise through the walls. Thousands of voices in dozens of languages, all talking about the same thing. The upset of the century. The human who beat the unbeatable champion. Already, the media was calling it the greatest moment in tournament history. Ambassador Linda Hayes arrived at the medical facility with a stack of data tablets. She looked exhausted but happy. I hope you're ready for what comes next, because the entire galaxy wants to talk to you. Jake sat up in his bed. What do you mean? Linda activated one of the tablets and showed him a list. These are formal requests for interviews, appearances, and meetings that have come in just in the last 2 hours. News organizations from 79 worlds want exclusive interviews. 23 different species have invited you to visit their homeworlds. 15 universities want you to speak about combat strategy. And this doesn't even count the unofficial requests. Jake looked at the list and felt overwhelmed. I'm just a fighter. I don't know how to do all this other stuff. You're not just a fighter anymore, Linda said gently. Whether you wanted it or not, you've become a symbol. You represent humanity's potential to the entire galaxy. What you do next will matter almost as much as what you did in that arena. Over the next few days, Jake began to understand what Linda meant. Earth's diplomatic situation changed overnight. Trade agreements that had been stuck in negotiation for years were suddenly approved. Territorial disputes that had favored other species were being reconsidered. Species that had treated humanity as ignorant newcomers were now eager to establish partnerships and alliances. Captain Greg Sullivan explained it during one of their meetings. Respect is currency in galactic politics. For years, we were trying to buy respect with technology, resources, trade deals, but none of that worked as well as what you did. You beat their champions in fair competition. You proved that humans belong at the same level as species that have been in space for thousands of years. When peace, One Piece, Jake understood the logic, but it still felt strange. He had entered the tournament thinking only about the fights themselves. He had not considered that his victories would reshape humanity's relationship with the entire galaxy. The requests for meetings kept coming. Some were from people Jake expected, like combat analysts who wanted to study his techniques. Others were surprising. A Dravenok philosopher wanted to discuss the nature of adaptation and change. A Vashin artist wanted to create a sculpture commemorating the championship match. A Prithian teacher wanted to develop a curriculum based on human problem-solving methods. Jake tried to accept as many requests as he could, but there were too many. Linda helped him prioritize, focusing on meetings that would benefit humanity's long-term interests. But even with her help, Jake spent hours each day talking to aliens about fighting, strategy, training, and human culture. One meeting stood out from the others. Zelthar himself requested a private conversation. They met in a quiet garden area on the station, a place designed to accommodate the environmental needs of multiple species. Zelthar's massive form looked strange among the delicate plants, but the Crithian champion moved carefully to avoid damaging anything. "I have been thinking about our match," Zelthar said through his translator. "For days, I have reviewed the footage and analyzed every moment. I want to understand how you defeated me." Jake considered his answer carefully. "You're a great fighter. Better than me in almost every way. Stronger, faster, more experienced. Then how did you win?" "Because I didn't try to match your strengths. I knew I couldn't beat you at what you do best. So I focused on what I do best, adapting and learning. Every exchange we had gave me more information about how you fight. I used that information to find the small advantages I could exploit." Zelthar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "My people have a saying, 'The tree that does not bend will break in the storm.' I think perhaps we Crithians have become too rigid. We have been supreme champions for so long that we stopped adapting. We assumed our methods were perfect because they had always worked before." "Your methods are excellent," Jake said. "But nothing is perfect. There's always room to improve. Always something new to learn. This is why I wanted to speak with you." Zelthar made a gesture that Jake had learned meant serious intent. "I wish to invite you to visit the Crithian homeworld. Our warriors would benefit from training with you, from learning your adaptive methods. In exchange, we can teach you techniques that my people have developed over thousands of years. This would be a cultural exchange, warrior to warrior." Jake was surprised. "You want me to train Crithian fighters?" "I want us to train each other. Your victory taught me that stagnation is a form of defeat. If the Crithians are to remain strong, we must be willing to learn from others, even from those we once dismissed." Zelthar paused. "Especially from those we once dismissed." Jake agreed to the invitation, and word of it spread quickly. Soon, other species were making similar offers. The Esesrathi wanted to share their knowledge of physiology and neural systems. The Shendari offered to teach energy manipulation techniques. The Valkor proposed an exchange program where human soldiers could train alongside their honor guard. These cultural exchanges became the foundation for a new era of human galactic cooperation. What started as a fighting tournament became a catalyst for genuine understanding between species. 3 months after the championship, Jake returned to Earth for the first time. Landing at the spaceport, he was overwhelmed by the reception. Thousands of people had gathered to see the champion. And when Jake stepped off the shuttle, the crowd erupted in cheers. His daughter was waiting with the crowd, and when Jake saw her, everything else faded away. He ran to her and picked her up, holding her tight while she laughed and told him she had watched every match on the broadcasts. "You won, Dad," she said. "You beat all of them." "I did my best," Jake replied. "That's all anyone can do." Earth's government offered Jake positions and honors. They wanted to make him a general, a diplomat, an advisor. Jake politely declined most of them. What he wanted was simpler and more meaningful. Amy Carter had an idea. She proposed creating a new kind of academy, a place where fighters from Earth and from across the galaxy could train together, not just to prepare for tournaments, but to learn from each other and build understanding through shared discipline. Jake loved the idea immediately. They worked with Linda Hayes and Greg Sullivan to get approval and funding from both Earth's government and the Galactic Federation. The academy would be built on Earth, but would accept students from any species willing to learn. The first class included humans, Crithians, Valkor, Prithians, Srathi, and representatives from a dozen other species. Zelthar himself came to Earth to teach, fulfilling his promise to learn and share knowledge. Seyrath arrived to instruct students in speed techniques and neural targeting. Champions from across the galaxy contributed their expertise. On the Academy's opening day, Jake stood before the assembled students and instructors. He looked at the diverse group, at species that had been strangers or even rivals just months ago. now gathered together with a common purpose. This academy exists because of a simple truth, Jake began. No one species, no one individual, has all the answers. We are strongest when we learn from each other, when we combine our different strengths and perspectives. I defeated champions in the tournament not because humans are superior, but because I was willing to study, adapt, and respect my opponents enough to learn from them. He paused, looking at each face in the crowd. Some of you are here because you want to win tournaments. Some are here because your government sent you. Some are here because you're curious about other species. Whatever your reason, I want you to remember this. Combat training is not really about fighting. It's about understanding yourself, respecting others, and pushing beyond the limits you thought existed. The academy flourished. Students who arrived as representatives of their species left as friends who happened to come from different worlds. Techniques developed on high-gravity planets were adapted for use in low-gravity environments. Martial arts from Earth were combined with alien combat systems to create entirely new fighting styles. Jake continued to compete in tournaments, defending his championship title. But he also spent most of his time teaching, passing on what he had learned to the next generation. Watching his students grow and develop gave him more satisfaction than any victory in the arena. 5 years after his championship victory, Jake stood in the same arena where he had defeated Zelthar. This time he was not fighting. He was watching one of his students, a young woman from Earth named Katie Brooks, compete in the semifinals. Katie fought with a style that combined human adaptability with Krithian precision and Srothi's speed awareness. She was facing a Dravenok champion, and she was winning. Amy stood beside Jake, both of them proud of what Katie had accomplished. "She's better than you were at her age," Amy said. Jake smiled. "She's better than I am now. That's the point, isn't it? Each generation should surpass the one before." Katie won her match and advanced to the finals. After the victory, she ran to Jake and hugged him, thanking him for believing in her. Jake reminded her that she had done the work herself. He had just shown her the path. That night, Jake received a message from Zelthar. The Krithian had been watching the tournament from his homeworld. His message was simple, but meaningful. "Your student fights with honor and skill. You have taught well, Jake Morrison. The galaxy is better because you refuse to accept the limitations others tried to place on you and your species." Jake thought about how much had changed since he first arrived at Station Apex. Nervous and surrounded by aliens who mocked him. He thought about the journey from that moment to this one, from being dismissed as a joke to becoming a respected champion and teacher. But what mattered most was not his own success. What mattered was that he had helped open a door for humanity, had proved that humans could compete and excel alongside species that had thousands of years of advancement. And through the academy, he was making sure that door stayed open for future generations. The championship belt Jake had won still hung in the academy's main hall. Students walked past it every day, and many of them stopped to look at it and imagine winning their own championships. But beneath the belt, Jake had placed a plaque with words that meant more to him than any trophy. Limitations exist only until someone refuses to accept them. Human potential is not defined by where we started, but by how far we are willing to go. Jake Morrison had shown the galaxy what one human could accomplish through determination, adaptability, and respect. Now he was teaching thousands of students, human and alien alike, that they could accomplish even more. The future belonged to those willing to learn, to adapt, and to never give up. And in that future, humanity would never be mocked again. "We won," Jake said, like he still could not quite believe it. Amy laughed and cried at the same time. "You won. You beat them all. You showed the entire galaxy what humans can do." Jake shook his head. "We showed them what humans can do when we work together, when we learn from everyone, and when we refuse to give up." Around them, the celebration continued, but Jake took a moment to close his eyes and just breathe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new expectations. But tonight, for this moment, a human was the champion of the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same again, simultaneously creating a web of attacks that seemed impossible to defend against. Each limb moved independently, but coordinated perfectly with the others. It was like fighting 6 opponents at once. Jake retreated, blocked, evaded. He was not trying to counter yet. He was studying, just as he had studied every other opponent. Zelthar's attacks were fast and powerful, but they followed patterns. Every fighter had patterns, even supreme champions. The question was whether Jake could identify those patterns before Zelthar overwhelmed him. A strike got through Jake's defense and hit him in the ribs. The impact lifted him off his feet and sent him sliding across the arena floor. The crowd roared. Jake stood up slowly, checking his ribs for breaks. Nothing broken. But that had hurt more than any hit he had taken in previous matches. Zelthar pressed forward, not giving Jake time to recover. More strikes came from all angles. Jake defended desperately, his arms and legs moving in patterns he had practiced 10,000 times. Block high, evade low, redirect, counter. But Zelthar was too fast, too strong, too experienced. Another hit landed, this time on Jake's shoulder. Then another on his leg. Jake was losing. The whole galaxy could see it. This was where the humans' luck ran out, where reality reasserted itself and proved that supreme champions did not lose to newcomers. After 8 minutes of careful positioning and tactical movement, Prism 7 made an error. He committed to a position that Jake had left deliberately open, thinking it was an opportunity. Jake had predicted the move and was ready. He struck from an angle that Prism 7 could not defend from, and the crystalline fighter fell. Jake Morrison had reached the finals. He would face Zelthar, the supreme champion, the same insectoid warrior who had laughed at him in the arrival bay, the same fighter who had told reporters that humans should watch and learn instead of embarrassing themselves. Now those words seemed like a prophecy, but not the way Zelthar had meant them. The galaxy was watching and learning, but what they were learning was that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Old thing. But that means you'll have to face the champions, the ones who've been doing this for decades. They won't underestimate you now. They'll come at you with everything they have. F. 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 Jake nodded. Good. I don't want them to hold back. I want to face the best they have. Why? Because that's the only way they'll respect us. Not just me. All of us. All of humanity. If I only beat the weak ones, they'll say we got lucky. But if I beat their champions, if I beat their very best, then they'll have to accept that we belong here. Amy smiled. No pressure then. No. Pressure then. Jake smiled back. No pressure at all. I've Jake odds of 300 to 1, just to survive past the first minute. That night, Jake lay in his assigned quarters and thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was 8 years old, and she had asked him why he was going to fight aliens. He had told her that sometimes you have to show people what you can do instead of telling them. She had hugged him and told him to win. Jake closed his eyes and went through the fight plan in his mind one more time. Tomorrow would tell him if he really belonged here, or if the entire galaxy was right to laugh at him.